and then we'll get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar, Meal Planning for a Feel Your Best Year. I'm Marta Human, a registered dietitian and a Wegmans Nutritionist, and I'm excited to be moderating today's webinar. Please note that the information provided during today's webinar is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute or replacement for medical advice, medical nutrition therapy, or individualized nutrition counseling. Now, I'm going to be turning my camera off in a second here, and then I'm going to be rejoining you at the end to moderate our question and answer period. And now I'm really pleased to introduce our presenter today, my terrific coworker, Kirby Branciforte. Take it away, Kirby.
Thank you, Marta, and welcome everybody to our first webinar of the year. And it's a great topic, but because as we say, this is to give you a feel your best year, because we know that folks are already starting to think about what they want their health goals to be for the year. And we really believe that getting meal planning down in a way that works for you can really set you up for success. It's kind of the foundation for all your healthy eating goals, because it's going to be what helps you get the food on the table that supports those goals. So reasons that it's important: it helps you save time. You become more efficient when you take a little bit of time each week instead of a bunch of time every night. It can save you money because you're less likely to buy things at the last minute that cost more. You get more time to look for affordable options. It certainly eases stress because it's like one less decision that you have to make for the day. And it certainly does support health, because I think we all know there is a difference between the decisions that we make when we have taken our time and given some thought to something versus the decisions we might make out of desperation. So before we jump in, I want you to kind of think about what you think of when you think of meal planning. So are you envisioning, scrolls of paper where every last tablespoon is accounted for? Do you think it's going to deliver gourmet style meals to your table? It certainly can be those things if that is what works for you. But what you might find is that by the end of this, you'll be rethinking meal planning. It might look a little different. It might be a little bit simpler than you might think, and not as many pieces involved as you might be imagining. So we'll go through the steps that we think are important to consider. We'll give you some strategies that are going to make it so you can really put your plan into action, and give you some meal ideas and inspiration so that you're empowered to do this no matter what the situation. So diving right in, we're going to go right to the meal planning steps. There's a lot of different ways to look at this. We find that these steps are at the core of what it takes to kind of make the meal planning process come alive. So the very first step you'll want to do is to consider your schedule. So really take a minute to think about two major things. One, what days this week do you have absolutely no time to think or cook or anything? So those are the days that you're going to start to kind of earmark for needing maybe quick meals that can come to the table with very little effort. And then you'll also want to think about, well, is there at least one day where you have an extra time? Because on that day, you're going to want to leverage that time so you become very efficient. You'll want to use that time to make some of the meals that maybe might take longer, maybe over 20 minutes, over 30 minutes. And you'll want to use that time, earmark it for doing anything else that you can for the week that will make your meals come together. So this is really about efficiency here. If you're already cooking, you're already prepping, you're already getting things ready, make extra so that you can use it throughout the week, and it comes together into your meals more quickly, and it also can kind of give you some ideas for other meals you might have. So step one, really think about your schedule for the week. The next step is to shop your kitchen. We all know about shopping the store, but do you ever think about shopping your kitchen? I'm going to guess that most of us can't name off all of the items, or even maybe the majority of the items that are sitting in our fridges, freezers, and pantries right now. There's probably a dusty old can of something that you forgot that you even bought. So this piece is really about getting familiar with what you have on hand at home and starting there. It's going to save you from buying something that you already have and don't need. So you also can reduce some food waste in that way as well. It's also where you're going to get some meal inspiration. When you look around and see what you have on hand, you should start to see some ingredients that maybe can come together in a meal. So for example, if you notice, I've got some rice, I've got some onions, I've got some diced tomatoes, maybe that can be like a Spanish style rice. So starting to see what types of meals can come alive from what you have on hand. Or if you have something sitting there and you're not sure how to use it, make sure you try to use it. Maybe you've got, a can of artichoke hearts or something like that. Look up a recipe so that you can shop your kitchen and start using the things that you have on hand and get them into meals on the table. So really getting used to being familiar with what you have on hand. And this doesn't have to take super long. You can just take a peek around and start to get a feel for what you've got going on at home. The next piece is actually to do the plan. So in the planning stage, you're actually going to combine the information from step 1, your schedule, and step 2, what you have on hand, and start to let it formulate it into what your week could look like. I have started here with dinner. Dinner, we find, is the meal that most people struggle with. And also, if you can really nail down dinner, there's all sorts of things that can happen. Meal planning gets a little bit easier. You start to use some of your leftovers for other meals. Maybe you incorporate it into lunch, and it just starts to flow and gives you a rhythm in meal planning. So we look at dinner first. And so this is just a very simple calendar. I mean, I really just kind of plopped it in there. It looks like what I kind of see in my own head. And you can see it's just like there's the days of the week. I've noted maybe on Wednesday, I've got an open house. And I know that I don't have time to feed anybody because I've got 3 kids and I got to get something in their bellies before we go. So that's a night I'm going to say, okay, that's going to be a takeout night. Same thing like Friday, maybe I know that we're going to get home late. We're not going to have time to cook. So maybe we're going to get pizza or we're going to heat up a frozen pizza. And you kind of follow along like that. I know what my schedule is. I know what I have on hand. I know Sunday I have a little bit more time. So maybe that's where I'm going to make that rice dish. And I'm going to maybe chop up extra peppers or something while I'm making that dish. So really starting to slot things in that take this information from steps 1 and 2 into account. And then again, when you're thinking about this before you move on to the next step, making note of other information you might need to make this plan come to life. So if Monday I know I don't have a lot of extra time, so I want to do something with chicken on a sheet pan, make sure you're checking your recipes at this point. So maybe you find our lovely sheet pan chicken thighs with pesto peppers and tomatoes recipe, and you make sure you have that on hand because you're going to need to know what other ingredients you need to make your plan really kind of come to fruition. So in this step, again, just taking that moment to start to slot things in and take note of that Thursday that you see there. There's nothing written there, and that's okay. And I'm going to tell you how to what to do when you have kind of a blank day or when plans change. So those are like actually the steps in meal planning. So you've got to your plan, but we know there's one more step we need to take to make sure that you actually can come full circle with this and get the meals on the table, which is to make your list, right? So now you're going to make sure that you make your list really taking all of that into consideration. So you're going to fill in the gaps between what you have on hand, what you found when you shopped your kitchen, and the plan that you've set for yourself. So that's like if we use that Spanish style rice as an example, that's knowing that I'm going to need to put my peppers on my list. Maybe I need a protein like beans or some ground meat that I need to put on my list. And so really encouraging folks, if you haven't already, to use our online shopping list builder that's available on our mobile app and on our website. It helps to organize things, gives you a running estimated total so you can stay on budget. And if you go to the store, it's organized by aisle. So again, these are things that can save you time. But if a handwritten list is your style, absolutely go for it. There's no right or wrong way to do this. And so when you look at these steps, they might seem kind of basic and like, well, of course, like that makes a lot of sense. Of course, I'd think about my schedule and see what I have on hand and yada da. But what often happens is that we don't give a lot of thought around step 1, really acknowledging the days that we need to make use of the extra time and the days that we know we don't have extra time. So we kind of fluff over that. And a lot of times we totally skip steps 2 and 3. So how many of you have ever just kind of been like, oh, this week is busy, I got to go get groceries. And then you just make your list, or you go to the store and I got to go get my groceries. This is where the system kind of starts to break down, is because we didn't take a couple of minutes just to do some of these things. So really breaking the thought process into those steps is really where meal planning success comes from. And it can take as long or as little as you want. I have a friend who she really loves to get like the papers on the table and kind of sort things out, writing things down. She's got her recipes all printed. She loves it. That is not me. I am all about saving time. I do most of this in my head. But sure, when I first started it, I might have done it a little differently, but now I just kind of take a peek around, think about my schedule. I do all of these things kind of in my head, so I have a general plan and a sense for the week, and make sure that I take that into account when I'm making my list. So these are the steps. So remember these steps when you go to start meal planning, and just see what it feels like to take them each one at a time. But that's not all that we want to think about to really make this successful. There's 2 strategies I'm going to share next that I feel like are meal planning gold. It's really what helps people kind of take it to the next level and sets them up for success forever. So the first one is how to make these meals healthy. We heard from so many of you that said, I want help getting healthy meals on the table. And while there's a lot of different ways to look at that and think about it, we think the simplest way to do this that works for most people, especially as a starting point, is to think about a balanced meal. To balance your plate or your meal, that simply means you're going to include at least 3 food groups and make sure one of those is a fruit or a veggie. That is the easiest, simplest starting point for getting what we would consider kind of a healthful or a balanced meal on the table. Getting 3 different food groups or more means you're getting a really nice mix of nutrients that are needed for overall good health without having to like micromanage everything you eat. Just 3 different food groups. And making sure each one's a fruit or a veggie helps you to reach the goal of 5 cups of fruits or veggies per day, which most adults, like 90% of adults, don't meet. So this is a way to make sure you're kind of doing all of these things that we know are part of a healthy pattern of eating just by thinking of your plate in this way. So on the side here, you see a visual of what this could look like. That's found on our balanced meals and nutrition section on wegmans.com/feelyourbest. And I'll remind you of that at the end. This is one visual of a nice, like kind of standard dinner meal that you can start with. So this could be, chicken, pasta, and broccoli. But be flexible, right? Because we don't always eat that way all the time. So maybe you want to have fruit on the side instead, or maybe instead of grains, you want to do a starchy veg and you don't want it to get too heavy. That's fine. Definitely be flexible. But always come back to this visual. I'm going to keep repeating this one because this is something that I do every time I make a meal. And in thinking of being flexible, be flexible in what you think a meal actually even looks like. So here's an example of what I would call a balanced meal that maybe looks more like a snack or an appetizer to some folks. So this is something I put out for my kids. I have 3 boys at home, so I'm all about like quick and easy. So you've got whole grain crackers there. That's a grain. I've got tuna and cheese. Those are protein. Also, the cheese gives you dairy. And then I've got 3 different types of fruit there. So I've actually got 4 food groups there. It involved no cooking. And I look at this and I see a balanced meal. So again, back to what I said, rethinking what this can look like, because some nights it will look like this. Some nights it's going to be this amazing meal that, you cooked and you spent a lot of time on. And other times it's going to be something like this. And that is great. It's not even just fine. I was going to say it's fine, but it's actually wonderful. So don't forget this visual. You're going to keep coming back to it. Next, the other strategy that really gives you that ability to kind of level up and feel this empowerment around meal planning is something we call stock for success. This is really just meaning that you're in the habit of creating a supportive food environment for you at home. So you're making sure that your kitchen, your space is really working for you and not against you. So it's got the thing that you need to support your own health goals. So thinking of that visual, making sure that no matter what, even if you don't have a plan, that you have at least a nice variety of 3 or more different food groups on hand at all times to make it easier when you're actually planning your meals, or to assemble those meals if your plans change. So if you remember that Thursday that was on that calendar that had nothing slotted in, this is what you could do. If you make sure that you're stocked up on different food groups, you can pull together a meal just by kind of filling in those spaces. And it allows you to be flexible, because I don't know about you, but most nights don't go as I think they're going to. So having a plan is great, but we know that plans change. And this is one way to just make sure that you don't get stuck in, deer in headlights where I don't know what to do. So I'm going to show you what this looks like in using real examples. And first, I'm going to show you kind of what my pantry generally looks like, or my kitchen kind of looks like. I won't show you actual pictures because it's not pretty, we'll say. So again, I have 3 boys at home, so So these are items that I almost always have on hand, but you'll see that the way that I actually think about my kitchen is in terms of this balanced plate. So when I'm thinking about what's in my pantry, my fridge, and my freezer, I'm bucketing it in my mind in terms of food groups. So I won't read through all of them, but you can start to see the types of things that I might make sure that I have on hand. This will, of course, change seasonally, but this is always my starting point. What do I have on hand that will help me put a meal together? The next thing I think about is like, well, what will bring the meals together? And I make sure I'm stocked up on what I call flavor makers. So if you have just like plain stuff kind of sitting next to each other, they might not be so exciting. So I make sure that I have something that will bring flavor and a lot of times some moisture to the meal that can pull it together and really kind of give it a more exciting eating experience. So some favorites that we have on hand often are listed here. And then lastly, because I don't know if I mentioned, but I am a busy mom. I need to have what I call cinch and pinch foods. So they come together easily in a cinch and they work when I'm short on time, which is most nights. So in a pinch. So these are just a variety of different foods that we often have on hand. We at Wegmans have such an unbelievable variety of cleaned and cut veg, steamables that I use all the time. And we are definitely a chicken nugget household. So that's one I always have on hand. So even if I just think of the chicken nuggets, I know a lot of folks would say, well, that's can't make a healthy meal out of certain foods. And this one comes up all the time. But geez, that's a protein. So if I look at that and I think, okay, I've got a protein covered, what are my other two food groups? Maybe I'm going to make sure that I've got maybe I'll put some whole grain crackers on the side, or maybe whole grain bread. And then I'm going to put maybe some grapes because that's what the boys are into right now. So that's a balanced meal. There's no reason that that can't be something that I feel good about. And it can be part of my meal plan for the nights that I know that we are short on time and patience. So let me give you a couple of meal ideas that kind of puts this into action. A lot of folks, when we asked you what your questions were, said, I want meal ideas. Tell me, basically like make the plan. But what I want to do is help you make the plan. And I'm going to show you how I do that using these common items that I have on hand. So for example, I'm going to start with one that maybe you wouldn't think of even for dinner, a yogurt parfait. This is one we do a lot in my house. There's no cooking involved. It is a balanced meal and it's using things that I have on hand. So maybe some night I might have yogurt, but instead of berries, I have bananas. Obviously, I can swap that in. But what if I don't have granola? That's taking the place of my whole grain. So I'll think to myself, well, I need a whole grain. So maybe I'll do some, whole wheat toast, and maybe I'll throw some peanut butter on there, make sure all the bellies are filled up. So this is just, again, using that plate or that balanced meal as inspiration. And I just kind of plug and play with what I have on hand. And that works if you're making a plan for the week or if you're short on time and need to do something quickly. Always falling back on those three different food groups. It works wonders. So next, going back to the kitchen, maybe now, it's Tuesday and we love to do a Taco Tuesday, and I just kind of pull together some of the ingredients that can make a taco. So really all you need for tacos is like to make sure you've got some type of protein, some shells and salsa, right? That's kind of what the essence of a taco is. But maybe I've changed what my toppings are. Maybe I've got avocados, shredded cheese. I have been recently informed by my son that it's not a taco unless it has shredded lettuce on it, which is news to me. So now that's something I try to keep on hand to keep him happy. But if you have tacos often, they can change, the eating experience can change each time just depending on what you put in it. So maybe one week you even do like a fish taco. We've got the Super Bowl coming up, so maybe you have some leftover guacamole and you make sure that you use it all up and say, oh, I've got this guacamole, maybe I'll make some tacos. So, and a lot of times I don't necessarily have taco shells on hand. I'll have tortilla chips and we'll do a taco salad. So again, it's just swapping them out, using what I have on hand and keeping that kind of the meal idea and putting it into action with different types of ingredients and toppings. Now, the last one I might think about is I know a lot of folks are trying to either eat more seafood, or a lot of folks have told us that they're pescatarian and looking for some seafood ideas. So say I know I've got this frozen shrimp on hand. It's like, what do I do with this frozen shrimp? You could certainly look up a recipe or look at this plate. Think about that shrimp is going to be my protein. Just pick a grain, any grain, any grain at all. and add some veggies to it. And one thing that I often will do is I'll just do it up with some pasta. This is in my own situation, it's because I know my kids like pasta. So the more I can show pasta with some food, like a seafood option that I want them to be exposed to, it helps them kind of get used to seeing those things together with a food that they love, which is pasta. So one other thing I've been really loving lately is our frozen snap peas. So again, I've got my veg, got my protein, I've got my grain, but I want to pull it together with a sauce. So I'll just throw like a vodka. The vodka blush is one of my favorites. So, the message here is that you really can swap in a lot of ingredients, and all it really takes is a little bit of, reflecting on what you have on hand, how you might pull it together in a balanced meal, and then what might level it up and kind of give a nice eating experience for you. So having those sauces can be really very helpful for that. And I do know when I think of some of the other questions that we got about helping with vegetarian or pescatarian meal planning, you're going to do the exact same thing I just talked about. But in your protein foods, you're just going to be stacking up on the ones that fit your lifestyle. So this is kind of a teach a man to fish situation where we want to kind of get used to using our pantry and our kitchen in this way, falling back on balancing it, and really just kind of getting comfortable with the idea that it doesn't have to be perfect. Some nights it's going to be quick and easy, and other nights you're going to have something that you spend a lot of time cooking, and it's really just all about doing what works for you. So a couple of resources that I want to share that can help to support this journey that we're on. The first is something we call our meal planning and shopping guide. This can be found on wegmans.com/feelyourbest in our meal planning and shopping made easy section. And it really kind of summarizes a lot of what we just talked about. And on the back is this really cool thing that we did called 5 Foods, 5 Ways that really is getting at the heart of what I just shared, that we can take an item and think of different ways that we can use it and really make use of what we often have on hand. So things like chicken, eggs, leftover veggies, and things like that. How are different ways that we can use what we have on hand, shop our kitchen, and fold it into our meal plan? And then last resource is that wegmans.com/feelyourbest page that Marta shared with you at the beginning. You can also get there by going to the health and nutrition tab. But this is what we would consider our hub for healthy eating education and inspiration. So we have lots of different on-demand nutrition webinars. So you see the link for that when you first get to that page, it's right at the top. Some of the topics we cover in those webinars are healthy aging, on eating for type 2 diabetes, what's the deal with protein, and many, many more. We also will have more information there on that Stock for Success that I talked about. That guide is found on the meal planning and shopping made easy, and so much more. Plant forward eating. So many folks said, how about meal plans for heart health? So we have a whole section on heart health and a webinar on heart health. So the idea is to kind of use what we talked about today as a basis, and then you go and find more information. And on every single one of these, every single one, all of our webinars, all of our pages, we give you product ideas and meal or recipe ideas that support the topic, so you can start folding that into your shopping list and your meal plan. So we hope you have a lot of fun kind of playing around in there. And with that, I think we are ready for our Q&A section, and please do complete our feedback survey. Marta's going to throw that into the chat for those of you who are joining us live, and it's going to open up in the browser after we close this webinar out. And you can also find it in the description of our on-demand webinar once it's posted. So there we go. Marta, would you like to join me and tell me what type of, hopefully some questions that we got from our friends that joined us today?
Yes, absolutely. We got some good questions, and I have put some links in the chat, so definitely check that out. And if you have any questions, reminders, like we've been saying, put them in the Q&A box, please. Okay, so a question that we got, and by the way, that was so good, and it's so helpful to learn all these little tips and tricks. So someone asked the best way to start meal planning would you use a workshop or a worksheet or a notebook, or what's your advice on that?
Well, that's a good question. So as with all of meal planning, it's really about doing what works for you. Like I said, I have a friend who really does like to write it all out. I think for a lot of people that can be helpful when you start. And then you kind of get the hang of things, and then you can maybe move to something that you might do more like I had described, kind of just do it in my head, but really just do what works for you. But also think about when you are getting started to make sure you pick a day to do it. So like as you leave here, pick a day that you're going to start this process. Even, just say, okay, I know I can do it maybe even right now after we end our time. And start a day to start doing it, and then maybe even pick a food group that you know that you want to get more of, that you're going to go stock up on. So do a couple of the steps just to get the wheels turning, and then just let it unfold from there.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So now we also got a couple questions about how to add variety to your meals. So someone is asking, what are some of your tips to keep a nice variety with meal prepping and avoid making the same food all the time? Like, how do you mix it up?
Oh my goodness. I love that question because I think I discovered the secret to this. So I always like to be able to share it, but I really feel like the secret is in the sauce. So having a bunch of different toppings that you might use, that you might finish your meals with. So you could have the same piece of chicken and you could put maybe that vodka blush sauce on it that I talked about. But if you put like a lemon dressing on it, now it tastes completely different. Or if you try different herbs and spices, or if you put salsa with something, really just making sure you're stocked up on these things. I've even heard of people using soup. I've tried it a couple of times. There's certain soups that you can use. You dump on your protein or mix with rice. And now it's just a completely different eating experience. And something I also like to do is with my leftovers, I don't want to have necessarily the same meal again. I'll put them in a bowl and I'll put some type of dressing on it and turn it into a cold bowl or salad. So I really like to make use of things like sauces, dressings, herbs, and spices to just completely change it. So it's a totally different meal. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I love that. I like to do that too. Like just take a trip around the world and all the different
Yeah.
sauces. It's different.
Oh yeah. We have so many at Wegmans. I love it. And I use stir fry sauces for things other than stir fry. So really just kind of get out of those boxes of what we think ingredients are supposed to be used for and just have fun.
Exactly. Okay, so two questions we got that are really kind of getting at the same overarching question, and that's feeding families with limited time and trying to keep everyone happy. And I know this is close to you because this is, with your three little ones at home. So,
Yeah.
what are your suggestions for planning healthy meals that everyone will eat? That's A. And B is, how about healthy eating or healthy living while feeding a family with just a little bit of time to do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, question every day. So a couple of things come to mind. One is to make sure you're making use of some of what we talked about today. So it doesn't have to be a home cooked, I would say, or cooked meal. So just kind of getting out of that mindset of it has to be cooked, making sure you're keeping things on hand that the littles like or that the family likes. Also, I really do find that using that balanced meal idea is a huge time saver because the amount of time that I used to spend just trying to figure out what was for dinner is now kind of erased by just knowing that I'm going to do that. And it's just going to be different ingredients every time. And I will also say we have a really wonderful section on our website called Kids at the Table. So wegmans.com/feel your best. Go to Kids at the Table because it really does address some of the strategies you can use when you're dealing with what we would call young eaters. So as they're trying to learn. And one other tip I'll share is that out of those three food groups that I serve each night, I make sure at least one of them is something I know everybody loves. So again, like I said, that pasta, I am okay if they just eat the pasta. They at least saw the shrimp, they smelled the shrimp, they saw me eating the shrimp, and then maybe someday they will also eat the shrimp. So really just kind of relaxing around the meal, around the table and using these things as you teach can really be helpful, I think, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll see. Ask me in 10 years if this worked. I think it will.
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much for all your tips and this wonderful webinar. That concludes. It's 1:00 now. So please fill out the survey when you get fed that at the end of when you hit end here. And then because we really appreciate it. And we hope you have a wonderful day. Stay warm. I think it's cold everywhere. And have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.